And it was one thing that always stuck with me, you know, and then realizing that I was part of this 60s group. And then I used to say, after that I learned about it, I used to say that I was a residue of residential school. And when I was younger, I used to call myself a society's child, you know, because I didn't know who my parents were. And so I just assumed, you know, I didn't have no knowledge of where I came from and, you know, like who were my parents, who were my relatives, who, you know, and so it was, there was a big part of me missing, you know, because I didn't know who I was. I think I was about 3 years old when I was taken away. And I remember I didn't know from which community I was from, because I didn't know, I didn't have a birth certificate, and there was one that existed, but I've never seen it, and I never knew how to spell my real name or what my real name was, and I never found out about my real name till I was about I think 11 or 12 years old. It might be just a name for people, but it was very significant for me because I lived with families that had different names. I lived with families that were different color skin. And for when I was young, I thought I was French. So, you know, I thought that I was French. And then when I started going to grade school, I found out that I was a Savage, you know, and I was a redskin who, an Indian. And that just totally blew me away. Growing up in this foster home, I never sat at the table with them. You know, my sister and I had this little chair and table, and I can still remember it was kind of like yellow mustard. And we ate there for years and years and years until my oldest foster sister got married. And when she got married, there was space at the table, so my sister joined the family, and it was such an honor. And it's funny what that made. They made a separation between us when that happened, you know. It was almost like this invisible line that, you know, she graduated almost, you know. And I sat in that, well, they moved the table away because I was getting quite big. I stood behind the stove, and that's where I ate. I ate like that for till I was 11 years old, till I left, because I got kicked out from the family because there was a lot of sexual abuse going on, and my foster brother used to sexually molest me, and his sister caught us, and my foster mother made it sound, well, she made me feel that I was the cause of it, you know, and that'd been going on ever since we were little girls, you know. And I remember seeing my sister getting molested by my older foster brothers. It was a 3-bedroom house, and the basement wasn't finished. And so the girls, her daughters, used to all sleep together in one room, and my sister and I were placed in the boys' room. And so we had our own bed, but the boys asleep, you know, on the bed next to us. And I remember my foster brother waking me up and taking me to the washroom. And, you know, even to this day, thinking, you know, like, didn't they ever hear the floor creaks? Didn't they ever hear, you know, the muffled, the sound, you know? And thinking, you know, how come they never, you know, woke up and, you know, like, hear this noise? And that's the way that I grew up, you know, and thinking that, because I didn't have any feelings, you know. I came to a point in my life where, you know, somebody would punch me or hit me, I wouldn't even cry. I really was disconnected from myself, you know. I was always up there and always looking down. And I think part of it, that's how I survived. I used to run away. There was nowhere for me to go. I'd go behind, you know, a gravel pit, or, you know, go hide underneath this tunnel, underneath the street. And I knew that I had to go back because I had to eat eventually. Where was everybody, you know? Like, where was, and at the time I used to question God, you know, like, where are you, God, you know? Because we used to go to church all the time, right? And then we'd come back and it'd be all this family violence and all this chaos. And I was strapped many, many times in my lifetime. You know, I remember having welts on my body and going to school, you know, and the teachers wouldn't even say anything about my welts. So from there I went to a group home, and I stayed in a group home for about 3 years, I think. And I liked it there. I really did. I liked it there. And the reason why I liked it there was because there were a bunch of kids who were all in the same boat, and it was okay, you know. The only thing that I didn't like was that they used to get visitors, you know, like their aunts or their uncles or cousin, or, you know, and I'd be sitting there waiting for somebody to come and visit me. And I remember thinking, you know, looking at the gravel road, and it was just like, and I'd be looking on both sides, you know, and every Sunday somebody would come and visit their kids, you know. And I never had anybody ever visiting me. They moved me away from there and brought me back to that home, to the first home. The social worker was just going to pick me up with a suitcase in the trunk and say, "Oh, you're leaving, we found you another home." And I remember never really keeping anything that belonged to me. It was just like packing this little suitcase. So I more or less grew up in this little suitcase. There was no pictures, there was no souvenirs, there was, nothing, I started being very, very promiscuous because that's all I knew, and I remember thinking at a very young age, because it was like, I was in purgatory, according to the Catholic religion, was that, if you thought a certain way, if you felt a certain way, if you did a certain thing, you were in purgatory, and I thought, well, you know what, I'm in purgatory, so I might as well continue what I'm doing. I spent, from 14 till I would say 27 in a heavy addiction, with alcohol and drugs and sex addiction, you name it. I had many addictions and a lot of codependent relationships and there were times where I through my adulthood where I just wanted to die, that life was so precious, and I didn't know that because I was just thrown away, and that there was nothing precious about me, and I always thought that, oh well, that's how I went through life. I put my life in danger many times, where I was beaten up very bad, where I was literally, like broken ribs and car accidents, and I put myself in situations where, I don't know, I'm still here. But one of the things that I have to say about, through those years that I drank, I don't think I would have survived if I didn't drink. I don't think I would have been able to deal with life, because it was so painful, and I wasn't ready. I was not ready to deal with any of that stuff. I was so angry, I was angry with the world, I was angry with everybody. I hated myself. I didn't know who I was. I don't know how I was conceived, I don't know if I was a wanted child. I don't know if I was an accident. I don't know if my mother drank with me. I don't know any of that, But it was almost like I felt that I was thrown away, And most of my life, that's how things were for me, That's why I never kept anything for myself, nothing, souvenirs or gifts or, because I wasn't worth it. And today, when I look at that, and finally had to realize, I had people used to tell me, Bernadette, these things were not your fault, you didn't ask for those things, you didn't, so through going to therapy and on top of therapy and meeting people and doing circles and talking and, crying and, collages and, oh my God, I tell you, I really therapized myself for a good 10 years, I think, because I needed that. I was walking down the street and I was thinking about that, and I thought, what is it that kept me alive, because my sister had committed suicide. I had friends out of all the foster children that I knew that lived in Swindler Falls. We were a dozen of us, and then later on in life I found out there was only 4 of us alive. All the rest had either committed suicide or had died of HIV or overdose and alcoholism. And I thought, what is it? Why am I still here? I really had to question and ask myself, why was it that I was still here, that I was still walking down the street, I was working in a women's shelter, I was helping other women. I'm thinking, how did I do that? How did I manage, And this little thing, said to me, you never gave away your spirit. And that's where I see myself always, I've always watched myself. I've always, seen myself, and I thought, that's what it was. I was always disconnected from myself. I remember when I quit drinking and quit taking drugs, and when I realized about my spirit, that I never gave up my spirit. And then I started dealing with my own family, with my son, and his, because he was apprehended for me a couple of times when he was small, and so when he came back to me, it was one of the things that I realized was that, everything that I said that I wouldn't do, I did, and everything that I didn't want to do and I did, it would just eat me alive. That guilt would just eat me, and it was a vicious cycle. You know, it was a vicious cycle because like I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to stop it. So I would go back again, and you know, and this cycle of, you know, that hatred that I had about myself, my identity, who I was, and it was just like, it's like it was just a big snowball, and it just kept going round and round and round, and I don't know how else I could explain it. And then one day, you know, I started dealing with it slowly, you know, and started working with my shame. And one of the biggest things for me when I finally realized, you know, the shame that binds us, the shame that keeps us, and started talking about it. And there was nothing to be ashamed of, because I didn't ask to be sexually abused. I did not ask to be apprehended and put in foster homes, you know. I didn't ask for residence school, you know. My family didn't ask for it, it happened, you know. And so all that shame that I was carrying around, and all that guilt and all that grief that I was carrying around, I didn't ask for it. And it was like a sense when I finally heard, you know, the first time that I really started following my spirituality, you know, and thinking, you know what, I'm still here, and I'm going to do the best that I can now, you know, because I realized that I'm not living on borrowed time anymore. I can say today that my good times outweighed my bad times, you know, and when I started realizing, you know, that some people were good people, and they were there to help me, you know, and they were there to guide me, you know, and so it was kind of like opening up that door of trust. My biggest fear is that, you know, a lot of our kids, a lot of our people that are out there, you know, they are forgotten people, and that they, you know, they may never be recognized, you know. And I think that's what this whole part of my life is, you know, is to be recognized, is to be heard, is to be understood, is to be, you know, I think we all want that. It was such an honor for me to be a grandmother, you know, and to think, you know, I don't deserve to be a grandmother, you know, but I am, you know, and to give her the best that I know how. We can't change the past, you know, but we can let go and try to have a better future. And that creating hope for the future, when I seen that, for me, it was like, that's exactly what I want to say. That's exactly what I meant to do, you know, and that's exactly who I am.